So, Smriti, you had asked me to talk a little bit about the work that we are doing on embedding SDG principles in climate financing and investment, because that's an area where UNDP has been focusing quite a bit under our administrator, Achim Steiner, and how this then in turn can drive gender outcomes in climate action. And other speakers have, of course, already spoken to the importance why the gender lens in climate action is important. Vulnerability of women, both because of their reliance on natural resources that are affected by climate change, but also vulnerability in the sense that they oftentimes account for a high number of deaths and injuries in climate-induced disasters like floods and other things. But of course, as we were also saying before, women are not only just victims, rather they can actually be very powerful agents of change if they have access to decision-making, like the Rwanda example in government decision-making positions, and if their views and voices are represented and they have access to resources. So, for example, with proper training and knowledge in technology, economic opportunities linked to climate adaptation and nature conservation, they can actually be a very important part of avoiding natural hazards and making a contribution to climate action. But that also means, in turn, that actually any effective climate policy has to have, for it to be successful, has to have a focus on gender. And I think we have long spoken, and there has been an ask for quite some time that, for example, the nationally determined contributions that countries put forward in terms of their plans to decrease emissions really have to incorporate gender target and that gender lens. And applying then that same logic to finance, it means that investment and financing that underpins these type of policies needs to also be gender sensitive to enable a low carbon transition that is inclusive. So now in China, I think we are presented actually with huge opportunities in that field. China, since 2020, has the biggest green bond market in the world, 11 trillion yuan in green credits, 1 trillion yuan in green bonds. But for this to drive effective, sustainable development that builds in gender, that incorporates gender, I think there is a need to broaden the scope of green finance to finance that aligns with the SDGs. And gender equality needs to be a core principle that informs investment decisions and the financial system to support a low carbon transition that is just and inclusive. Globally, we're seeing similar trends. Sustainable investment has been on the rise. The global market in the developed world is US $30 trillion in sustainable investment assets. But if we look at sustainable investment with a gender lens, or gender lens investing as it's called, it's only 1/4 of that 30 trillion that is currently going into globally sustainable investment. So to leverage basically that potential, UNDP has developed globally SDG impact practice standards for 3 actors in the low carbon transition, namely companies, bond issuers, and equity funds. And connected to these standards, we've also developed a taxonomy that can provide or that provides a concrete categorization of SDG-aligned investment areas. Now, there are two features that distinguish these standards from other standards. Firstly, they balance all the 17 SDGs and how they affect each other for a more comprehensive and integrated approach to sustainable and inclusive development and not just green development. So again, broadening the definition. And because of that, they also particularly identify vulnerable groups and serve vulnerable groups such as women and girls to promote their empowerment. In Indonesia, we've applied this type of logic also to public finance in assessing the gender responsiveness of existing government climate programs, and we've then supported the government there to develop technical guidelines for better integration of gender considerations into climate change budgeting. So I think my key message here for this purpose of this panel is really we have the tools, we know how to do it, we just need to be a lot more disciplined and systematic about it and approach it in an integrated manner, bringing very much the gender focus into overall standards, into financing, and across our programming to make a dent. Thank you very much.